Imagine a city so grand it floated on water, its towering temples shimmering in the sun, its streets teeming with life, and a vibrant culture unmatched in the ancient world. Welcome to Tenochtitlan, the heart of the mighty Aztec Empire, a civilization that rose from myth and flourished through blood, sacrifice, and innovation. But what happened to this awe-inspiring empire? Join us as we journey through the rise, brilliance, and ultimate fall of the Aztecs, uncovering the secrets behind their power and the indelible legacy they left on the world. Imagine a shimmering city rising from the heart of a vast lake, its temples glowing gold in the sunlight, its causeways buzzing with activity, and its markets brimming with the hum of thousands of voices. This was Tenochtitlan, the crown jewel of the Aztec Empire, an urban marvel that stunned even the seasoned Spanish conquistadors upon their arrival. Built on a series of islands in Lake Texcoco, Tenochtitlan seemed to defy nature itself. Its canals mirrored Venice, but its scale, symmetry, and spiritual significance made it entirely unique. The story of the Aztec Empire is one of ambition, faith, ingenuity, and war. From humble beginnings as migrant tribes wandering the harsh Mexican terrain, the Mexica people, later known as the Aztecs, rose to dominate much of Mesoamerica in just under 2 centuries. They built a sophisticated society with a strong centralized government, complex religious beliefs, powerful armies, and an economy that connected hundreds of city-states. But just as swiftly as their empire ascended, it collapsed in the wake of European conquest. The Aztecs, or more accurately the Mexica, traced their ancestral home to a mystical place called Aztlán, meaning place of the herons. According to legend, they emerged from 7 caves, guided by their patron god, Huitzilopochtli, who instructed them to journey south and settle where they would find an eagle perched on a cactus, devouring a snake. This divine vision would become both their cosmic destiny and the emblem of their nation. Their migration spanned generations. The Mexica were not the only people moving across central Mexico during this time. Numerous tribes were competing for resources and land in the post-classic Mesoamerican world. Seen as outsiders and often scorned as barbarians by more established city-states, the Mexica were forced to move frequently. They survived by offering their services as mercenaries, slowly learning the arts of war and diplomacy. Eventually, around 1325 CE, they arrived at a marshy area in the Valley of Mexico, a place few others wanted to settle. But there, on a small island in Lake Texcoco, the Mexica saw their prophetic sign, an eagle on a prickly pear cactus, devouring a serpent. Here, they would build Tenochtitlan, the place of the prickly pear cactus, a city that would become the heart of an empire. Though they were latecomers to the region, the Mexica were not starting from scratch. They inherited the cultural legacy of earlier civilizations. The Teotihuacanos, whose city once rivaled the size of Rome, left behind advanced architectural styles and religious ideas. The Toltecs, with their warrior kings and capital at Tula, inspired the Mexica's notions of divine rulership. From these roots, the Mexica would synthesize a new identity, blending ancient traditions with their own ambitions. Over the next century, they carved out a place for themselves through strategic marriages, military contracts, and careful alliances. Despite initial subjugation by more powerful neighbors like the Tepanecs, the Mexica used every opportunity to grow in power, waiting for the moment when they could rise. That moment came in the early 15th century. The Mexica were about to make history, not just as survivors of migration, but as the architects of one of the most formidable empires the Americas had ever seen. The year 1428 CE marked a dramatic turning point in Aztec history. Tired of serving under the heavy hand of the Tepanec rulers of Azcapotzalco, the Mexica allied themselves with 2 other city-states, Texcoco and Tlacopan, to launch a revolt. Their joint victory established the foundation of the Triple Alliance, a powerful military and political confederation that would eventually control a vast swath of Mesoamerica. At the heart of this alliance was Tenochtitlan, which rapidly grew in wealth, population, and influence. Under the rule of Itzcoatl, r. 1427 to 1440, the Aztecs began rewriting history, literally. Itzcoatl ordered the destruction of old codices and created a new narrative that glorified the Mexica's divine destiny. This act of historical revisionism served not only to unify the people under a common ideology, but also to legitimize their newfound power. Itzcoatl's successors, Moctezuma I, or c. 1440 to 1469, and Ahuitzotl, rose from 1486 to 1502, expanded the empire through aggressive military campaigns. Moctezuma II restructured the tribute system, compelling conquered states to provide goods, labor, and soldiers. Ahuitzotl, often regarded as the most warlike of Aztec rulers, led campaigns as far south as Guatemala. The Aztec Empire, at its height, ruled over more than 5 million people and extended across modern-day Mexico from the Gulf Coast to the Pacific Ocean. Yet, it was not just military conquests that made the empire thrive. It was the city of Tenochtitlan itself. Built on a series of islands connected by stone causeways, the city was an engineering marvel. The Mexica created chinampas, or floating gardens, which allowed them to produce food year-round in a seemingly inhospitable environment. Aqueducts brought fresh water from nearby springs, while canals served as highways for canoe traffic. At the city's center stood the Templo Mayor, a massive double pyramid dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, god of war, and Tlaloc, god of rain. The temple symbolized the dual forces of war and agriculture, pillars of Aztec life. Surrounding the temple were palaces, schools, marketplaces, and thousands of homes. Spanish chroniclers later described Tenochtitlan as cleaner, more organized, and more vibrant than any European city they had ever seen. As the empire grew, so too did the ideology that underpinned it. The Aztecs believed they were chosen by the gods to sustain the cosmos, and their military campaigns served both political and religious purposes. Conquered peoples were expected to pay tribute and provide captives for sacrifice. In this way, warfare, economy, and religion were all tightly woven into the fabric of the empire. The Aztecs had become more than a city-state. They were now lords of an empire, and their capital, Tenochtitlan, stood as a symbol of imperial majesty and divine will. But as their power reached its peak, shadows began to gather on the horizon: foreign invaders, internal dissent, and a prophecy that would soon come to pass. Beneath the grandeur of the Aztec Empire was a highly organized social hierarchy that shaped every aspect of daily life. At the top stood the Tlatoani, the supreme ruler, often regarded as a semi-divine figure who led both in war and governance. Below him was a structured class system that maintained order and upheld imperial power. The nobility, or pipiltin, formed the elite class. These individuals held positions as priests, judges, military leaders, and governors. Their status was often inherited, but could also be earned through exceptional acts in battle or service to the state. Nobles lived in lavish stone homes, wore fine cotton garments, and received formal education in elite schools. The commoners, known as Macahualtan, made up the bulk of society. They were farmers, artisans, merchants, and laborers. Despite their lower status, they played a crucial role in the empire's economic and military functions. Commoners were subject to taxes and military service, but they could own land and move up in status through military merit. At the bottom were the Tlacotin, or slaves. Aztec slavery was not hereditary, and individuals could become slaves through debt, punishment, or capture. However, slaves retained certain rights and could eventually buy their freedom. Interestingly, slavery in Aztec society was less about race or ethnicity and more about economic utility and legal obligation. Education was mandatory for all children, regardless of class. Boys from noble families attended Calmecac, where they studied religion, astronomy, law, and leadership. Commoner boys went to Telpochcali, focusing on military training and labor. Girls were taught domestic skills, though noble women could also become priestesses, midwives, or healers. Women played important roles in the home and market, and noble women wielded quiet yet significant influence through marriage alliances and temple duties. The Aztecs maintained strict legal codes. Laws were codified and enforced by a judiciary system that included local courts and higher judges. Offenses ranged from theft and adultery to sorcery and treason. Many crimes carried severe penalties, sometimes even death, reflecting the Aztecs' belief in maintaining cosmic and social order. Judges were expected to be impartial, and trials were held publicly, underscoring the role of law in legitimizing imperial authority. The Aztec worldview was deeply spiritual, rooted in a cosmology that wove together gods, time, and destiny. Their pantheon was rich and complex, filled with deities who embodied nature's forces, celestial movements, and moral dualities. At the heart of the Aztec faith was Huitzilopochtli, the sun and war god, and the patron of the Mexica people. His journey across the sky each day was seen as a cosmic battle against darkness. To ensure his survival, the Aztecs believed he required nourishment in the form of human blood, specifically from warriors captured in battle. Alongside him stood Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a god of wisdom, wind, and creation. He was revered as a civilizer, associated with learning, agriculture, and culture. In contrast, Tlaloc, the rain god, brought life-giving water but could also unleash destructive storms. The gods were not just symbolic. They were real, omnipresent forces to whom the Aztecs owed their lives and fortunes. Human sacrifice played a central role in religious life. While shocking to outsiders, these rituals were seen by the Aztecs as sacred obligations. Sacrifices were often staged on temple pyramids, with elaborate ceremonies involving music, dance, incense, and ritual instruments. The heart, believed to contain the vital essence, was offered to the gods. Victims included war captives, volunteers, and even children in rituals to appease Tlaloc. These sacrifices reaffirmed the cosmic order and strengthened the Aztecs' bond with the divine. Time itself was sacred. The Aztecs used two primary calendars: the Tonalpohualli, a 260-day ritual calendar used for divination and religious events, and the Xiuhpohualli, a 365-day solar calendar governing agricultural and civic life. The calendars interlocked in a 52-year cycle, marking a cosmic century, after which great rituals were held to renew the world. At the spiritual center of Tenochtitlan was the Templo Mayor, a twin pyramid dedicated to Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc. Each side represented key elements of Aztec duality: war and rain, sun and water, fire and fertility. The temple was the stage for massive festivals, where thousands might gather to witness offerings, dances, and sacrifices that tied the empire's fate to the gods' favor. Behind the Aztec Empire's military strength and religious fervor was a vibrant economy that sustained its massive population and far-reaching influence. At the core of this economy was agriculture, especially the ingenious Chinampa system. These floating gardens were man-made plots built on lake beds, separated by canals and secured with willow trees. They allowed year-round cultivation of key crops like maize, beans, squash, chili peppers, and amaranth, providing a stable food supply for millions. Everyday life revolved around markets, which were central not only to trade but to social interaction. The most famous was at Tlatelolco, where as many as 60,000 people gathered daily. Merchants sold everything from produce and pottery to exotic feathers, jade, cacao, and obsidian. Transactions were regulated by market judges, ensuring fairness and order. The Aztecs used barter rather than coinage, but certain items held standardized value. Cacao beans served as a kind of currency, as did cotton cloth, copper axes, and obsidian blades. Long-distance merchants known as Pochteca formed a respected class, traveling across Mesoamerica to trade and gather intelligence. Craftsmanship flourished across the empire. Artisans created detailed codices, painted books recording history, tribute, and rituals. Jewelry crafted from gold, turquoise, and shell adorned the nobility, while everyday ceramics and tools showed incredible technical skill. Although metallurgy was not as advanced as in other parts of the world, gold and silver were used mainly for decoration, not weaponry. Homes were modest but functional, typically made of adobe with thatched roofs. Families cooked on clay stoves and slept on reed mats. Men worked the fields or served in the army, while women managed households, wove cloth, and sold goods in the market. Life was deeply communal, and most people followed the cycles of farming, festivals, and religious duties. The Aztec Empire's rise was driven by its formidable military prowess, and war was deeply embedded in Aztec culture. Warriors held a place of honor, with their skill in battle determining their social status and personal legacy. The most prestigious among them were the eagle and jaguar warriors, named after the fierce animals that symbolized strength, agility, and fearlessness. These elite soldiers wore elaborate costumes and fought with great courage, often seeking to capture prisoners for the human sacrifices central to Aztec religious practice. Military training began in youth, with boys being educated at the Telpochcali, the commoners' school that emphasized physical strength and battle readiness. In contrast, those destined for the higher ranks of the military were trained in specialized academies, where they learned not only warfare, but also the responsibilities of leadership and religion. The Aztec military was built on both conquest and tribute. The empire expanded its reach through a series of military campaigns against neighboring states, systematically absorbing them into the Triple Alliance. These conquered regions were required to pay tribute to Tenochtitlan, bringing a steady flow of goods, including precious metals, textiles, and human labor, back to the capital. Tribute not only fueled the economy, but also demonstrated the power and divine right of the Aztec rulers. One of the most significant military strategies was the Flower Wars, or Xochiaoyotl. These ritualized battles, fought between the Aztecs and neighboring states like Tlaxcala and Huexotzinco, had both religious and practical significance. Though the battles were designed to minimize loss of life and typically ended with the capture of prisoners rather than death, they helped the Aztecs secure captives for sacrificial rituals and reaffirmed their martial dominance. These ritualized wars were as much a display of power as they were a means to maintain the empire's spiritual and economic needs. The arrival of Hernán Cortés and his Spanish forces in 1519 marked the beginning of the Aztec Empire's dramatic downfall. The Spaniards, vastly outnumbered, relied on a combination of diplomacy, military strategy, and the exploitation of existing rivalries to gain a foothold in Mesoamerica. Cortés's initial contact with the Aztecs was characterized by cautious diplomacy. He was received in Tenochtitlan by Moctezuma II, the emperor, who, though initially fascinated by the foreigners, was confused about their true intentions. Cortés's party was initially welcomed as potential deities, with Moctezuma offering them gifts, including gold, and seeking to placate them. However, tensions soon escalated as Cortés took Moctezuma hostage, using him to gain control of the city and manipulate the Aztec power structure. The arrival of smallpox and other European diseases, which devastated the indigenous population, played a key role in weakening the Aztec Empire. The virus spread rapidly among the Aztecs, who had no immunity, causing widespread death and panic. The siege of Tenochtitlan in 1521 was a brutal campaign. Cortés, now allied with the Tlaxcalans and other indigenous enemies of the Aztecs, laid siege to the city. The Aztec forces, though resilient, were overwhelmed by a combination of Spanish gunpowder weaponry, cavalry, and the devastating effects of disease. Starvation and disease decimated the population of Tenochtitlan, and after months of intense fighting, the Aztec capital fell. The once mighty Tenochtitlan was reduced to ruins, and with it, the Aztec Empire collapsed. The fall of the Aztec Empire marked the beginning of a new era under Spanish colonial rule, which brought profound changes to Mesoamerica. The encomienda system, a form of forced labor, was imposed on the indigenous people, replacing the previous tribute system with European exploitation. The Aztec nobility was either killed or assimilated, while the rest of the population was subjected to European religious conversion, cultural erasure, and enslavement. The Spanish sought to replace the old Aztec ways with Christianity and European norms, but this was not entirely successful. However, the Aztec legacy endured. Despite centuries of colonization, Nahuatl, the language of the Mexica people, remains spoken by millions in Mexico today. Aztec symbolism, such as the eagle, serpent, and sun, continues to appear in modern Mexican culture and national identity, most notably in the country's flag. These symbols represent not only the Aztecs, but also the resilience and endurance of their descendants. The Aztec Empire, with its remarkable grandeur and brutal practices, encapsulates the complexity of human civilization. At its zenith, the Aztecs built a sprawling, advanced society with impressive engineering feats, intricate religious ceremonies, and a highly structured military. Yet, beneath the empire's shining accomplishments lay the dark side of human sacrifice, conquest, and the relentless pursuit of power. The duality of their legacy is a reminder that civilizations, no matter how advanced, are shaped by both their greatest achievements and their most troubling practices. In the end, history is not just about conquest and the fall of empires. It is also about what endures, what is remembered, and what continues to inspire. The Aztec Empire's legacy has shaped modern-day Mexico and continues to resonate with millions of people worldwide, reminding us that even in the face of destruction, the essence of a civilization can live on through culture, symbols, and the shared memory of its people.